Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why some people receive healing while others remain stuck in cycles of pain, sickness, and suffering? Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you pray, how many treatments you try, or how much faith you muster, something is still holding you back? What if I told you that your healing isn't just about medicine, mindset, or even faith alone? What if there is something unseen, something actively working against your restoration, something that must be removed before true healing can take place? There is an evil spirit that thrives on deception, fear, and oppression. It doesn't just attack the body, it targets the mind, the emotions, the very core of who you are. It whispers lies, makes suffering feel inevitable, and convinces you that healing is beyond reach. But what if I told you that this enemy has no real power, only the power you unknowingly give it? What if the chains keeping you bound could be broken today? Stay with me, because what you are about to hear could change everything. By the end of this, you will not only recognize the force that has been blocking your healing, but you will have the authority to cast it out once and for all. This is your moment of breakthrough. Evil does not always come with a thunderclap or a fiery spectacle. More often, it is a whisper in the dark, a creeping shadow that seeps into the cracks of the soul. It operates in silence, moving unseen, but never inactive. This is the nature of the evil spirit that blocks healing. It does not announce itself, nor does it demand attention. Instead, it lingers, feeding on the hidden things: fear, doubt, bitterness, and despair. There is a reason why so many suffer in ways that seem endless, why some illnesses linger beyond medicine's reach, why certain wounds refuse to close. It is because these afflictions are not merely physical. A sickness of the body can be bound to something far more dangerous, a sickness of the spirit. And this evil spirit, the one that nurtures suffering, does not simply exist by chance. It thrives on the very things that weaken us. It begins subtly. A small fear takes root, perhaps the fear that healing will never come, that the pain will never subside, that the suffering has a claim over one's life. The spirit whispers that this is permanent, that nothing will change, that hope is foolishness. Doubt follows, weaving its way through the mind, poisoning thoughts with endless questions. What if I am not meant to be whole? What if this is my fate? What if there is no escape? Over time, these thoughts are no longer just thoughts. They become strongholds. The person suffering no longer questions whether healing is possible. They assume it is not. The spirit has done its work, chaining them in place, making them prisoners of their own belief. It does not need force when it has persuasion. It does not need to strike when it can deceive. This deception is its greatest weapon. It convinces its victim that it does not exist. It hides behind logic, behind rational explanations, behind the belief that only what is seen is real. And so, the one afflicted searches for answers everywhere except where the true enemy resides. They fight with medicine, with treatments, with sheer willpower, never realizing that something unseen still holds them captive. But the nature of this spirit is not only in what it does, but in what it prevents. It prevents relief even when the body should be recovering. It prevents peace even when comfort is near. It prevents faith even when truth is spoken. It suffocates hope, ensuring that healing never takes root. Those who are bound by it do not always feel its presence directly. Instead, they feel its effects. Exhaustion that lingers without cause, anxiety that rises without reason, a constant cycle of fear, weariness, and despair that never fully lifts. The body aches, the mind tires, and the heart loses its strength. The person suffering may not recognize that an unseen force is fueling this cycle, but the evidence is there. It is not always a possession or an overt oppression. Often it is simply a lie planted in the mind, a seed that grows unchecked. It is a force that convinces a person to accept their suffering, to believe that healing is distant or impossible. It does not need shackles when it has resignation. It does not need to strike when it can whisper. It does not need to be seen when it can be felt. The greatest strength of the enemy is not brute force, but deception. It does not need to break a person's body when it can first break their mind. If it can convince someone that healing is beyond reach, then it no longer has to prevent their healing, because they will do that themselves. They will surrender before the battle even begins, allowing sickness, suffering, and despair to settle in like permanent residents. Deception is a craft, an art of distortion that makes falsehoods seem true and truths seem ridiculous. It does not tell outright lies, for those are too easy to recognize. Instead, it weaves a version of reality that feels logical, reasonable, even inevitable. It tells the afflicted that they have tried everything, that hope is a child's fantasy, that healing happens for others but not for them. It takes the small, natural doubts that every human experiences and amplifies them until they become absolute. This is why so many remain in their suffering, not because healing is impossible, but because they have been deceived into believing it is. The spirit behind this deception works like a master manipulator, speaking in whispers that sound like their own thoughts. If healing were real, you would have seen it by now. If you were meant to be free from this, wouldn't you already be? Perhaps this suffering has a purpose. Perhaps it is safer to accept it than to fight it. These thoughts do not feel foreign, they seem rational, which is exactly why they are so dangerous. Fear is its closest ally. The deceiver knows that fear paralyzes, making people hesitant to act, to believe, to step forward in faith. It does not need to force a person into submission. It only needs to make them afraid of what happens if they resist. What if I hope for healing and nothing happens? What if I believe only to be disappointed? What if I step forward only to fall again? The enemy does not need to win the war, only to keep its victim from fighting it. This deception also thrives on reinforcing past pain. Every past failure, every past disappointment, every moment of suffering is replayed like a haunting melody. Remember when you thought you would get better, but you didn't? Remember when you tried and it didn't work? The spirit of deception thrives in the mind's memory, using past wounds as proof that healing is impossible. It twists experiences, making them seem like permanent conditions rather than moments in time. The weight of this deception is not always noticed immediately. It settles gradually, like fog rolling over a valley, obscuring what once was clear. The longer it lingers, the more real it seems. It does not shout or demand, it simply remains, whispering its falsehoods until they sound like truth. The person afflicted no longer asks whether healing is possible, they assume it is not. They no longer resist the pain, they accommodate it. They no longer see an enemy at work, they see only a cruel reality that must be endured. The body is not an isolated machine, separate from the soul. It is an intricate vessel, deeply tied to the unseen realm, influenced not just by physical forces, but by spiritual realities. When the spirit is burdened with bitterness, fear, or hopelessness, the body responds in kind. Illness, fatigue, chronic pain, these do not always stem from mere biological malfunctions. Often they are manifestations of something far deeper, something that medicine alone cannot reach. A wounded soul carries weight, and that weight presses upon the body. Those who live in prolonged stress find their immune systems weakened. Those who carry deep-seated anger feel its effects in their bones, their joints, their heartbeat. Anxiety grips the chest, tightens the muscles, and disturbs sleep. Depression saps energy, slows healing, and dulls the senses. The unseen burdens of the heart and mind do not remain confined to the invisible. They find their way into the physical, shaping a person's very state of being. Bitterness is among the most destructive forces. It festers, poisoning the spirit, making a home in the soul's deepest places. It begins as a wound, perhaps from betrayal, disappointment, or loss, but if left unchecked, it hardens. The body feels its effects as surely as the mind does. Studies have shown that prolonged resentment correlates with high blood pressure, weakened immunity, and even heart disease. But long before science measured these things, wisdom already knew. Bitterness rots the bones, unforgiveness weighs down the heart, and a crushed spirit dries up a person's strength. Fear, too, is a thief of health. It does not merely dwell in the thoughts. It affects every organ, every nerve, every breath. The body of one who lives in fear is constantly on edge, flooded with stress hormones that were meant for brief moments of danger, not for a lifetime of worry. Over time, fear wears the body thin, disrupting digestion, draining energy, and leaving a person vulnerable to afflictions that would otherwise be fought off with ease. It builds invisible walls, keeping healing at bay, making the body feel like a house with locked doors and closed windows, trapped, suffocating, unable to receive what it needs. Hopelessness is perhaps the most subtle yet devastating of all. When a person truly believes there is no reason to fight, the body listens. It ceases to strive for renewal. It stops resisting illness with the same strength. Healing requires life, but despair drains life away, leaving the body vulnerable. Those who give up in their spirit often see their physical condition decline faster than expected, not because the sickness itself grew stronger, but because the will to resist it grew weaker. Healing is not only about treating symptoms, it is about restoring what was lost in the soul. A broken heart can weaken the body, but a renewed spirit can bring strength. The body responds to what the spirit believes, to what the mind accepts, to what the soul clings to. If the spirit is crushed, the body suffers. If the spirit is set free, the body follows. There is a fundamental truth that many overlook. Authority has been given, but it must be exercised. The unseen realm does not operate on passivity. It responds to command. Those who suffer under the weight of sickness and oppression often believe they are helpless, as though they must simply endure what comes their way. Yet, there exists an authority, one that has already been granted, one that can drive out the very spirit that hinders healing. The issue is not whether the authority exists, but whether it is recognized and used. Evil operates on deception and intimidation, but neither of these holds true power. They are effective only as long as they are unchallenged. Just as a squatter remains in a house when no one demands their removal, so too does the enemy remain where no authority is asserted. Sickness lingers where resignation has taken root. Darkness stays where it is unopposed. The enemy does not need permission to afflict, but it does need compliance to remain. The moment a person stands in their authority and refuses to allow the affliction to persist, a shift takes place. Authority is not about shouting louder or displaying outward strength. It is about knowing what has already been established. A person who understands the weight of their words speaks differently. They do not plead with darkness, they command it. They do not negotiate with sickness, they drive it out. This is not arrogance, it is alignment with truth. The forces that oppose healing recognize this authority, but they also recognize when it is absent. They test, they push, they resist, waiting to see whether the one speaking truly believes in the power they claim to have. Doubt is the greatest thief of authority. When a person hesitates, questioning whether they truly have power over their situation, the enemy finds room to remain. Authority wavers when confidence wavers. The words spoken in uncertainty carry no weight, no force, no consequence. This is why many who attempt to rebuke affliction see no change, because they do so half-heartedly, unsure whether they have the right to do so. The authority to remove hindrances to healing is not based on emotions or personal worthiness. It is based on a truth that remains unchanged regardless of feelings. There is no passivity in driving out the enemy. Those who would see their healing manifest must stand with unwavering resolve. Authority is not a request, it is a command, a declaration that does not ask but insists. When sickness is confronted with true conviction, when the spirit of affliction is rebuked with unshakable certainty, it cannot remain. It may resist, it may delay, but it cannot stand against the one who fully understands the power they wield. The difference between those who remain bound and those who walk in freedom is not circumstance, but the recognition of authority. Some wait for healing as if it is something to be earned, while others take hold of it as something already given. The authority to cast out that which blocks healing is not reserved for a select few. It belongs to all who will grasp it, believe it, and use it. Healing is not merely the absence of sickness. It is the restoration of wholeness. Too often, people focus only on removing pain, disease, or affliction, forgetting that true healing requires more than just the expulsion of what harms. It demands renewal, an infilling of something stronger, something life-giving, something that prevents the return of the very thing that was cast out. When a body is healed but the soul remains weary, when affliction departs, but the mind is still filled with fear, the door remains open for suffering to return in another form. Nature abhors emptiness. Just as a house left vacant will eventually be filled with dust, decay, or intruders, so too does the soul left unguarded become vulnerable. When an affliction is removed, whether spiritual or physical, something must take its place. Fear must be replaced with faith, despair with hope, weakness with strength. If not, the same oppression that was once cast out will find a way back in, sometimes even stronger than before. This is why some people experience temporary relief, only to find themselves struggling again. They fought to be free, but they did not fortify themselves against the return of what once bound them. Healing cannot be sustained by passivity. It requires a transformation of the inner being. A renewed mind does not entertain the same doubts that once gave sickness a foothold. A restored spirit does not tolerate the same fear that once weakened the body. Renewal is not simply about avoiding suffering. It is about ensuring that health and wholeness become the new reality. Renewal begins with what is allowed to take root in the heart. The thoughts entertained, the words spoken, the beliefs held, these shape the foundation upon which healing stands. A person who has been freed from affliction but continues to dwell on fear and negativity unknowingly invites trouble back into their life. Thoughts of defeat create an environment where sickness can thrive once again. Renewal demands a shift, a conscious effort to fill the mind and spirit with what strengthens rather than weakens. There is power in words. Just as words can wound, they can also heal. A person who constantly speaks of their suffering, even after receiving relief, reinforces the very thing they wish to escape. But a person who speaks life, who declares strength even in weakness, who proclaims hope even in uncertainty, builds a fortress against the return of affliction. Renewal is not just about rejecting what is harmful, it is about deliberately embracing what is good, true, and restorative. Healing is not a one-time event, but a continuous process of maintaining and protecting what has been restored. The body follows where the mind leads, and the mind follows where the spirit is anchored. Those who fail to renew their inner being may find themselves slipping back into old patterns of sickness and suffering, not because their healing was incomplete, but because they did not cultivate the strength to sustain it. Renewal ensures that healing is not just received, but retained. Healing is not something to be delayed, yet many hesitate, waiting for a better time, a clearer sign, or a greater assurance before they act. This hesitation, however, is precisely what allows the affliction to grow stronger, to deepen its hold, to establish itself as a permanent fixture in a person's life. The longer one waits, the more entrenched the suffering becomes, not just in the body, but in the mind and spirit as well. Delaying action is not neutral. It is surrendering ground to the very thing that must be expelled. There is an urgency in the unseen realm that many fail to recognize. The enemy does not wait to afflict, so why should one wait to resist? Darkness does not hesitate to spread, so why should one hesitate to drive it out? The moment healing is recognized as something already available, something not to be earned but to be claimed, it must be acted upon without delay. Hesitation is an open door, an opportunity for doubt to creep in, for fear to whisper its lies, for resignation to take root. Some believe that waiting will make them stronger, that in time they will build up enough faith or enough courage to take the necessary steps. But waiting does not build faith, action does. A person who refuses to act until they feel fully prepared will never act at all. The first step must be taken in the midst of uncertainty, in the presence of fear, despite the lingering doubts. The spirit that blocks healing thrives on delay, knowing that every moment wasted is a moment in which its influence grows. Immediate action does not always mean an instant physical change, but it does mean a shift in authority. The moment a person chooses to stand against the affliction, the battle begins to turn. It is not about seeing the full manifestation of healing instantly. It is about refusing to allow the enemy another moment of control. It is about breaking the cycle of acceptance, about rejecting the lies that sickness is permanent, about stepping forward even when everything in the natural realm seems unchanged. Healing often comes in layers, in waves, in progressions that unfold over time. But none of it begins without the first step. The decision must be made now, not later. The words must be spoken now, not when it feels convenient. The enemy does not retreat when it is ignored. It retreats when it is confronted with unshakable resolve. Many miss their healing not because it was never available, but because they never took hold of it. They waited for the perfect conditions, the right moment, the overwhelming confirmation that it was time. But the time is always now. Sickness does not wait, oppression does not wait, affliction does not wait, so neither should the one who seeks to be free. The power to break the chains has already been given, but it must be used decisively, boldly, without hesitation or compromise. The battle for healing is not just physical, it is deeply spiritual. The unseen realm influences the seen, and the forces that hinder restoration thrive on deception, fear, and passivity. The evil spirit blocking your healing is not a vague force. It is a real, strategic enemy that operates through doubt, oppression, and delay. But it has no power except what is given to it. The body and soul are interconnected, and healing requires not just the removal of affliction, but the renewal of the spirit. The mind must be freed from lies, the heart must be strengthened with truth, and the body must respond to the authority that has already been granted. Suffering remains where permission is given, but freedom comes when authority is exercised. The key is not in waiting for the right moment, but in taking decisive action now. Healing is available, but it must be claimed. The power to remove the spirit that blocks restoration is already within reach. Fear, bitterness, and hopelessness have no right to remain where they are not welcomed. Do not delay, do not hesitate, do not entertain the deception that tells you to wait. Stand firm, speak with conviction, renew your spirit, and take hold of the healing that has been meant for you all along. As you step forward, know that you are not alone in this journey. Strength is already within you, and victory is not beyond your grasp. Walk with confidence, stand in truth, and let nothing hold you back from the healing and freedom that are rightfully yours. May your path be filled with renewal, restoration, and unwavering hope. Thank you for your time, your heart, and your willingness to receive these words. I wish you strength, clarity, and healing beyond what you have imagined. Stay steadfast, stay courageous, and may you walk in complete wholeness.